12 years old. I'm from Vietnam. Now I read Pinocchio Part 2. Pinocchio traveled with the cat and the fox a very long way, unable to see anything on account of the blindfold they had placed over his eyes. Finally, the cat removed the blindfold, and Pinocchio found himself in a solitary field with a canal nearby. Now, stoop down and dig a little hole in the ground and put your gold pieces into it, said the cat. Pinocchio did as the cat had said, then filled up the hole with a little earth. Now then, said the fox, go to that canal and fetch a can of water. Then come back and water the ground where you have sowed your coins. Pinocchio went to the canal. As he had no can, he took off one of his shoes and, filling with water, he watered the ground over the hole. Is there anything else to be done? He asked. Nothing else, answered the cat. We can now go away. Return in 20 minutes, and you'll find a shrub already pushing through the ground, its branches loaded with money. The poor puppet, beside him with joy, set out on one road leading away from the field, while the cat and the fox took another. The road led Pinocchio to a nearby town. Its streets were crowded with dogs yawning from hunger, yarn sheep trembling with cold, roosters without combs, and peacocks with no tails, for they had sold them. Through his crowd of beggars and shamefaced creatures, a lordly carriage passed from time to time. Pinocchio walked along and counted the minutes one by one. Soon, very soon, I will be rich and buy myself a carriage, he bragged to the creatures around him. When he thought that it finally must be time, Pinocchio hurried back to the field of wonders. He went right up to the little hole where he had buried his coins, but there was no tree, not even a shrub. Becoming very thoughtful, he took his hand out of his pocket and gave his head a long scratch. An explosion of laughter burst out above him. Pinocchio looked up to see a parrot. What are you laughing at? He demanded. I'm laughing at those simpletons who believe in all the foolish things that are told them, and all entrapped by those who are more cunning than they. Are you perhaps speaking of me? Yes, poor Pinocchio, replied the parrot. You must know then that while you were in town, the fox and cat returned to the field, took the buried money, and fled like a wind. At these words, Pinocchio began with his hands and nails to dig up the earth that he had watered, but the money was no longer there. He rushed back to the town in a state of desperation, but no one there would help him. They could hardly forget how an arrogant puppet had behaved not an hour before. Poor Pinocchio wandered the streets, growing hungrier and ever more desperate. At last, he came upon a woman with indigo hair carrying 2 cans of water. May I have some? He asked. Drink, my boy, said the little woman. Pinocchio drank like a fish. Now, if I could only appease my hunger, he said. If you will help me carry home these 2 cans of water, I'll give you a fine piece of bread, the woman said. Pinocchio looked at the cans and did not answer, for he was not accustomed to doing work of any kind. You shall also have a nice dish of cauliflower dressed with oils and vinegar, she said. Again, Pinocchio looked at the heavy cans. And after that, I'll give you a beautiful bonbon full of syrup, the woman added. At the mention At the mention of this last dainty, Pinocchio could resist no longer. With an air of decision, he said, I will carry the cans to your house. They reached the house, and the little woman sat Pinocchio down at the table already laid. She placed before him the bread, the cauliflower, and the bonbon. When Pinocchio had finally filled his empty stomach, the woman asked where he was headed. To see my father, Pinocchio cried, and he told her Pinocchio cried, and he told her all about good Geppetto. How did you come to be so far from your father, and in such a desperate state? Asked the woman. I have no idea where I am, but I can relate to how I got there, Pinocchio said, and he told her of Fire Eater, his arduous journey with the fox and cat, and his abandonment in the field of wonders. What of the gold pieces? The woman asked. Where have they ended up? Not wanting her to call him a simpleton as the parrot had done, Pinocchio patted his pocket and said, Right here! And his nose grew 2 fingers longer, for he was telling a lie. The woman asked, Why didn't you use the coins to buy food, if you had them in your pocket? I wasn't hungry, Pinocchio said, and his nose grew another 2 fingers. Not at first, he amended. At this, his nose grew to such a length that a poor puppet could hardly move in any direction. The woman with the indigo hair looked at him and laughed, for she was no more and no less than a beautiful fairy. For more than 1,000 years, she had lived in the surrounding wood. There are lies that have short legs, and lies that have long noses, she said. Your lie, Pinocchio, is one that has a long nose. Pinocchio began to mew and moan. The fairy let him cry, but only for a while. Then she beat her hands together, and 1,000 woodpeckers flew in at the window. They immediately perched on Pinocchio's enormous, ridiculous nose and pecked at it with such zeal that in a few minutes it was reduced to its unusual dimensions. Now, said the Blue Fairy, if you promise to tell your father every bit of the truth, I'll take you home. Would you? Said Pinocchio. Oh, what a good fairy you are! And you're a good boy when you put your mind to it. Would that it were true, said Pinocchio, looking at the shoes Geppetto had made him. But really, I'm not a boy at all. The Blue Fairy showed Pinocchio the way home. Only when the puppet opened the door, and anticipating the sight of Geppetto's smiling face, there was no one at all inside. Seized with a grim suspicion, Pinocchio ran to the yard out back. There he found a marble stone on which were engraved sad words, which the Blue Fairy read aloud. Upon hearing this epitaph, Pinocchio fell with his face on the ground, covering the tombstone with 1,000 kisses. He burst into an agony of tears. He cried all night, and when morning came, he climbed into his bed still crying, although he had no tears left. "Oh, Papa," he wailed, "why did I not die instead of you? I who am so wicked, whilst you're so good." The blue fairy, who had stood by all night, finally spoke. "Dear Pinocchio, I cannot bring your father back, but if you will be a good little puppet, I promise that you will become a real boy. Only you must obey me and do everything I bid you. Willingly. Pinocchio sniffed. "I'm tired of being a puppet. It has brought me nothing but sorrow." "Good. Now dry your eyes. For tomorrow you'll begin school." Goodbye.